Next, we will get into the crux of the DAX. Okay, now let us take a look at what exactly calculated column is all about, calculated table is all about, and measure is all about. So when I walked you through, or when I covered the reporting part, or as part of reporting part, right, I would have created the calculated columns, and also I created the calculated table. I don't know how many of you remember this. How many of you remember I have created a calculated table for calendar function to create the date table, isn't it? Using DAX function, I created the calendar table. You remember? Okay. So look here. I just show you here. Look here. This is the one, right? So when I click on this, in this, when I used calendar function, right? So that time calendar is a DAX function. Okay. So using which we create. So when I use calendar in the case of calculated table, in the case of we have created calculated columns also. Just a while ago also I showed you, and also we have used measures couple of times in the past. Anyhow, we'll take a deep dive to understand what is calculated column and what is calculated table and what is a measure, when we can use these things. When should I use calculated column, calculated table, and measure? We'll take a look at this. And first of all, what is calculated column? What is calculated column? Calculated column is an extension of a table. Can we say like that? It is an extension of a table that is evaluated for each row. Okay, so this calculated column, as I discussed at the outset of today's session, it lives in the X velocity or Vertipack in-memory storage of Power BI. Remember this. So just like all the other data in your table, right? So that you import from the data source, right? So this one calculated column will also become part of your table. Okay, so I just go back here. Now the question is, okay, I just show you the same thing here. I just look here. These are all called as your calculated columns. I just created these columns based on the existing columns. So this column location key is already part of my data model. So these are all the fact sales, my fact sales table, isn't it? Fact sales. These are the columns, right, that are part of that one. Sorry. See, these are all part of that one. See, column 2, column 3, column 4, column 5, right? These are all the calculated column. Now these calculated column became part of my data model, which means it consumes space in the memory. Calculated column stores values in memory. Calculated column stores values in memory. Okay, it is calculated row by row in the table. We have something called row context. We'll discuss this after this topic. Okay, so why do we need to use calculated column? Calculated column, if you want to create any derived variable or derived column. So this column we derived, for example, this column we derived based on the existing column. This column is not much helpful. To give context to this one, I have used this one. Let's say you are operating your business across the locations, across the country. You want to understand the city name very clearly. Let's say my business is based out of London, and I don't understand what is HYD in India. Instead, you specify the complete city name. I wanted to understand by the city name only. I cannot understand with the abbreviation. So in this case, what happened? For each row, right? So what it does is the calculated column, it is derived row by row in data table. Okay, so it is often used as an intermediate step also. For example, I have created the revenue column here. So based on the revenue column, only I can find out the profitability. But don't argue with me, then why should I use variables, right? Why can't I use variables? Let's say you have a revenue column is available here in this table. If you want to, that revenue column also you derived, for example, quantity into list price, that is the one will give you the unit price. Sorry, list price into quantity will give you the sales amount. Based on the sales amount only you can compute the profitability, isn't it? Without sales, the revenue, can you find out the profitability? So in this case, the calculated column, which is nothing but the revenue, we used it as an intermediary step to obtain the final result, which is nothing but profitability. And importantly, remember this, the calculated column will get refreshed at the time of refreshing the memory, okay, or at the time of refreshing your report. Only when you refresh your report, only then the calculated column will get refreshed in the memory, okay, and it will not get calculated, it will not get recalculated when filter changes on the dashboard. Let's say you have a slicer. When you apply or when you make a selection in a slicer, right, it will apply the filter, right? Even though you apply the filter, the calculation will not change. The formula will remain as it is. For example, you are sales amount, you arrive the sales amount column by multiplying or by taking the product of list price and quantity. This formula will not change even though if you apply different filters, right? It is pre-calculated and stored. It will get the right. So only when they refer, right, so the calculation of this column will get will happen only at the time of refreshing. Only when you refresh the report manually or when you schedule a refresh in the Power BI Cloud service, this calculation will happen. Okay, it will happen again. Okay, it will perform calculation once again. So if you refresh it. So to summarize, calculated column is a new column or it is an extension of your existing column. It is calculated row by row, and a calculated column is, we can use it as an intermediary step or a temporary place, right? Temporary column to perform complex derivation or something like that. It is refreshed at the time of so the calculation will get the refreshed or the calculation happens only at the time of refreshing. Okay, it will get pre-calculated and stored. It consumes space in your model. Okay, since it is part of your data model, right? Since it is part of your data model, it consumes more space. More the column you add it consumes more space. Especially the volume of the data is very high. It consumes a lot of memory. So okay, what is the other example for this one? So the classic example is, still it is not that clear, isn't it? So the what exactly, so the when should I use calculated column? The classic example here, you have date of birth, right? So let's say I just go and create a new column. I just want to find out the age of each customers. So just record it. Column 2, here I just say date diff. We have something called date diff function is available. See, if you just type date, you will find bunch of columns are available, bunch of built-in functions related date is available, and date def, you don't have to remember everything. Simply when you type the function, you can get the syntax here, date 1, date 2, and first date, right? So in this case, the date of birth column, is my first argument. This is one date column. What is the second date column? Today. There is a function called today. As on today, what is the age of this customer? Next one is the interval, right? So here you tell me the difference between the date of birth and today. As of today, what is the, how many years lasted, right? Look here. This guy is 22, 24, 27, 30, 25, 31. It computed the age. So in this case, it evaluated row by row for every customer, right? The age has been evaluated row by row for every customer. So now the question is, why should I have the customer age here? Suppose you want to do some kind of profiling, you want to do something like revenue spent by age group. In that kind of situation, you will have to create some, you may not be having the customer age, you might be having the date of birth. With that you can find. So especially in the case of insurance, right? So in the case of insurance, the customer, they specify the date of birth, so you can derive their age to check what is the correct age. Again, in that kind of situation, this plays a crucial role, because based on the age, the premium value differs. So in simple term, it evaluates the age. In this case, the age, I just specify the age of the customer. The age column, the calculated column age, is evaluated row by row for every customer. So this one will not get changed based on the filter context. Based on the filter context, I repeat this, the formula will not get changed. If I go to report canvas, and if I if I apply the filter only for, if I select those people born before 2000, so what it does is it will take the subset of the records and it show the age. It will not change the formula there. The formula will remain same. This is one of the key difference. This is one of the thing you need to remember, so that you will be able to understand very clearly when I explain you about the measure, right? So after I explain the measure, you will be able to understand the difference between calculated column and measure. In the case of calculated column, the expression gets evaluated row by row, and also it doesn't get changed. The formula doesn't get changed based on filter context. As simple as that. Okay, and what is measure? Measures are evaluated based on filter context. It is opposite. Okay, the measures are evaluated based on filter context. Okay, and also, right, I'll talk about that later. So measure, now let us jump into measure. Now you understood what is calculated column. You have fair amount of idea, but still you need to start work on it. Only then you will understand in depth, right? So when I can use calculated column, when can I use measure? You can use either of them. Okay. So can't I do row by row? Can't I evaluate an expression row by row using measure? Yes, it is possible. Okay. So measure. When can I use measure? Measure is used for calculation across rows. If you want to perform any aggregation, then you can go for measure. What is aggregation? Summarization. I want to find out the sum of sales or sum of unit sale or total number of count function, min function, max function, distinct count function, and average function. And these are all the examples for aggregations or summarizations. These two terms are same. When you create a measure, it does not live in your data set. It will get computed on the fly when you call it. Now you understood the difference between calculated column and measure some extent. In the case of calculated column, it will be part of your model column, but measure, it does not store anything in memory. Only when you call the measure, it will get calculated based on the formula, whatever is specified in your measure. It will get computed on the fly only when you drag and drop it in a visual. So look here, in this case I just look here, age. So I have used this function datediff built-in function to derive the age from the date of birth. You can see the output here, but when I create a measure, you cannot see the value there immediately. Okay, supposing I just go and create a measure, simple measure, I go to the modeling tab, or you can go to the ribbon. So instead of going there every time, I just go here and fact tables, and then I just go and create new measure. You can click on it here also. Use for, okay, I just do one thing. I already for other batch have given the same thing. I just give some different name for this measure. Okay, I just go and say M here, measure. Total sales is a measure already used. Okay, I just say M1. Fine. So total sales M1. So can you see total sales M1 here? It is not part of my table columns because it is a measure. I cannot see the output as soon as I create a measure, like how I can see it in the calculated column. You can see the result, as soon as you create a calculated column, whereas in the measure you cannot see it. If I want to see it, what should I do? You can use some visuals. This is the one I created. I just drag and drop it here. So this is my total. This is the measure I created it. So what I did aggregation. When I click on the total sales here, so here sum of fact sales and sales sum of, right? Sum function. Sum is an aggregation. So measures are usually aggregations. Measures does not live in your data set. It is calculated upon calling the, look here, it is calculated only when I dragged and dropped. It gets calculated on the fly. It is not stored in memory. The same measure can be reused in other measure. A measure can be used in other measure. A measure aggregates all rows in the data and returns the result. You need to remember this. So unlike calculated columns, a measure is not stored in the memory, or it is not part of the table, and therefore you cannot use measure for filter. Okay, that is the difference between calculated column and this one. Calculated columns are part of your table, measures are not part of your table. Only when you call on the measure, it will get computed. So hence it is CPU intensive. Whereas in the case of the calculated column, since you are storing that as part of your table columns, it will consume memory intensive. If especially the volume of the data is very high, and if the number of calculated columns are more, it is memory intensive. But the advantage of calculated column is you can use the calculated column to do some kind of filtering. For example, here I created the age bucket. right? So if we use some kind of filtering, not this one, we the customer column, look here. So here I create a column. If you create a slicer on this column, number column, what will happen is, if you slide, and if you slide the age slider by moving it on the left side or right side, you can change the range of age, right? If you change it from 24 to 30, you can just drag it this side and that side, slider. So you can use this column to filter the data set, whereas measure you cannot do any filtering with that, but you can use calculate function to do the filter, or yes, something called DAX, other functions like filter, you can use it, but you cannot use the measure itself to do some kind of filtering, like how we can use calculated column to filter the data in your table. So these are the common difference between these two things. And next what I do is I just go and create it intentionally, this column. New column. This is an expression. This expression will get evaluated row by row. The formula will remain as it is, even though you apply any filter on this column. The formula will remain as it is, but this calculated column will be part of your data set. If the volume of the data is very high, it consumes more memory. But you can use this column to do some kind of filtering, all the things you can do it. Now you understood the difference between measure and calculated column. Okay, now what I do is, can't I do this in measure? Using measure, can't I do this one? Row by row, can't I do this? I just, in the interest of time, I just copy this one. I just go to the report canvas and I just go to the modeling tab, and I just go and create a new measure. If I copy paste this in a measure, will it work? It will not work. It will throw an error. Look here, it is underlined. This column and this column got underlined, which means there is a syntax error here. Cannot find name. First of all, you cannot find these columns here. So what I can do is, I have a function called sumx. Using sumx function, I can do row by row evaluation. When I type the sumx function, on top you can see the syntax, the table name. You need to first argument supposed to be table name. I just give you a quick tip so that you can remember it for all kind of function name which ends with x. Sumx, average x, count x, count ax, all the DAX function which ends with x are called iterative function. So in this case, I am using sumx function. Let's see what happens. I just press enter. What I do this, I just copy this one here. Okay, I just go and click on, sorry, no, this one, another table. Shows me this value 33, same thing, right? Okay, fine. So but in this case it did the row by row evaluation, right? It gets executed, iterative function, sum x, the function sum, right, ends with x. The suffix of sum is x here, hence it is an iterator function. The iterator function iterates row by row to evaluate an expression. Okay, so whatever we did it as part of the calculated column to perform the row by row, right? So we can do it, but using sumx function we can do it, but we cannot use directly like this there. Okay, you can do the same thing here also. Okay, okay, let us do one thing. I just go back here. Can I use sumx here in the here itself? Can't I use sumx function instead of using the the direct thing? I just go and create a new column. It will throw an error, right? No, it is not throwing an error, but it did the overall total, right? So it did the aggregation here. Okay, what happens is it takes the sum of the list price into sum of fact sales quantity. So it is taking the everything here, right? Though it is an iterator function, since you have used it as part of calculated column, it is not doing that, right? So the row by row, it is, see this column, whatever the expression that we have used it was evaluated row by row, whereas the sumx function, when I used it as part of a calculated column, it is not doing row by row, but behind the scene it is doing it. It takes the total value for each and everything. Okay, it finds the multiples of these two things and then it does the sum of all the things. Okay, so it is not doing it here. It is not applying the filter context. It is not applying the filter context. It does the same thing. What I do is I create another column. So the calculate is a robust function. Okay, it is a very sophisticated function in DAX. It's an advanced function. Okay, it is throwing an error. Okay, and the first argument supposed to your expression. The calculate, in the case of calculate, for example, if I just type it here, the first expression, the argument supposed to be expression, it cannot be a table. Okay, it's not a table. Okay, here what I do is fact sales. Can I give like this, or let me do one thing, sum of fact sales see the expression refers to multiple columns. Multiple cannot be converted to scalar value, right? So what I am going to do is total sales M1 or let's do one thing, first argument supposed to be our expression, right? But still it is not working. Fact sales into this one, you can apply the filter, but you can apply filter with other things. let me do one thing. Okay, so let us ignore this at this moment. Okay, so now let us go by this one. So we have created the SumX function here, but the same SumX function, when I use it in the measure, it does the aggregation. But if you use the same thing in a calculated column, it is not doing the it is doing the aggregation, but it is not doing the filter context. It is not applying the filter context. Row by row, it has to filter it, isn't it? It is not doing it. So there are two types of measure. One is implicit measure, other one is explicit measure. What do you mean by implicit measure? When you look at any numeric value or any variable in your table, look here, list price is a numeric variable. Just before that, you can see the sigma sign. So order number is a numeric variable. You can find sigma. This sigma notation you can find in front of all numeric variable, which means the moment when you load the data into your model, it does the summarization using some function. It does the aggregation using some function by default. Okay, it pre-calculates the aggregated value here. Okay, so this is the one. Okay, for example, I just go back here. I just look here. In this case, I use SumX function, right? In the measure, I use SumX function. I'll just show you here. Simply, if I drag and drop the sales amount, what is happening here? $33,000, almost it is rounding it off, right? I did not use any measure here. Simply, I just dragged and drop it. So, which means, right, this is called implicit measure. You don't have to, create a measure to find out the aggregation for this column or any numeric variable. So behind the scene, it does the aggregation automatically. So whereas, so now you understood the difference between implicit and explicit measure. What I used here is explicit measure. What I used is implicit measure. And the next one is, we'll try to play around with this one again. I'm going to create another measure. So anything when you find the sigma and the calculator, that is your calculated column. The calculator kind of things are your measures. These are your measures. I just copy this in the interest of time. I just go to the modeling tab and I just go and click on new measure. And some function, using some function also you can do aggregation. I'll show you some function now. Already we use some function, right? So here we have used some function. What is the difference with sum and SumX function? Can someone tell me what is the difference with sum and SumX function? Sum of sales amount. Simply I just go and say, my God, I need to give different name. Oh, this is not, I'll give some other name. Say I created 3 measures so far. In this one I use sum of sales amount in this measure. Here I've used SumX iterator, but here I'm using sum function using calculate. I call the sum function as part of your calculate. Okay, you raised, who raised the hand? Radha. Okay, I'll unmute you. So why don't you tell me what is the difference between sum and SumX?
Sum is used for to know the total values for a column, and the SumX is used for total values for an expression.
Okay. Are you sure?
Yes, sir. Yes.
I say it is not same. Sorry, it is
Okay.
same. Both of them are same. It is not different. Both sum and sum x are same. Okay.
I mean, result is maybe a same, but sum is used for total values for a particular column, but sum x is used for total values for an expression.
No, wait. I'll show you that.
Okay.
So here I have used, oh my god, what name I give? Total sales, right? Total sales something, yeah, calculator. This is the one I used it. See, in this case, I have called the sum function, right, as part of calculate. I did the aggregation. I invoke the sum function as part of my calculate function. It gives me the same output. But here, if I use sum of sales amount, it gives me this one sum x function. This I simply dragged and dropped it. This is implicit measure. So to argue with you, to debate with you, I'll show you. We will see what happens. Now when I use, wait, sum function, I used simply the sum function, isn't it? Sorry, this is the one, total sales M1. Okay, so this is the one, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create another measure. See, it is working fine. Total sales sum x. This is the one I used it, not this one. This is the one I created. Look here. Here also sum of sales amount. Here also I have used sum of sales amount. But here in this case, here I use sum x. Right. So here I just drag and drop this. So all these values are same here. So what I'm here this one sum x. Wait. Calculate, right? So calculate, and so sum x. Oh, I did not use sum. Okay, this is the one, right? Sum x. Here I did not use sum x. Okay, that's the problem. Here I mentioned sum x, but I did not use it. Okay, sum x. Fact sales. Only thing is you need to if you use any iterator function, the first argument is supposed to be fact sales. So table name. First argument is supposed to be table name whenever you use a function which ends with x. Sum x, average x. Total sales, sum x, m1, right? So this is the one. Look here. So this is also same. So this is also same. This is also same. This is also, everything is same. But here I've used an expression, but here I did not use expression. In the place of expression, I simply specify this one. So let us see one thing. Here I just, instead of doing the, okay, sum x, right? I did this one. Fine. So when I use sum of sales amount and sum x of sales amount, both of them return the same value. But when I use sum x with the expression like a list price into expression, it evaluates, it performs the aggregation when evaluating the expression. In all the cases, it remains same. To summarize, right, a sum function and sum x function, both of them are same. When you use a sum function, behind the scene, Power BI, what it does is, the DAX engine, what it does is, it generates something like this, query like this. According to us, we are giving just sum of sales amount. But behind the scene, it translates the sum of sales amount as this one. So now the question is, then why the hell should I have sum function and sum x function? Sum of function is for evaluating to perform row by row context, right? To convert your row context into filter context, you can use sum x. Okay, that purpose also you can use it. And when sum function, does the aggregation for the sales amount column, then why sum x? Why should I have these two things? Behind the scene, it extend or it translate your sum function like this, sum x. The reason is simple, syntax sugar. This is called syntax sugar. This is to simplify the developers to quickly understand or improve their productivity. Instead of typing the many lines of code, sum x, the table name, comma, the column name, instead of doing that, you can simply say sum of sales amount. That's it. Both of them are same. Okay, in the interview, if they ask you, you tell them both of them are same. The only difference is sum x function. With sum x function, we can evaluate an expression. But both of them are same. The sum function will get translated behind the scene by the DAX engine as sum x only. This is what the interviews are. So most of the thing, both of them are completely different. It is not completely different. Behind the scene, how many of you are aware of the Hadoop? That's why if you work with multiple technology, you know that. See, in the case of Hadoop, we have something like Hive. Hive is a data warehouse. According to us, we are writing SQL query. When you execute your SQL query in Hive, right, behind the scene, the SQL query will get converted as a Java command. Behind the scene, I say select star from table, but behind the scene, my select star from table will get converted as a Java code, because Hadoop can understand only Java. You understood? Same thing is happening here. Syntax sugar. In Hive, we write SQL query because I am comfortable in writing SQL query. I am not comfortable in Java because I have to write lines and lines of code in Java. That is syntax sugar. To ease or simplify the developer job, right? So they've given some function. It is a syntax sugar. That's all. Okay. So both of them are sum and sum x function are same. Fine. It's already 7:15. I'm very tired. Okay. I have headache and all. Okay. So what we will do is we'll continue the session next weekend. We'll upload this video probably after some time. Okay. To summarize the difference between calculated columns and measures, the calculated columns can return multiple results. You need to remember this also. Whereas measures always return only one value. So hence you cannot filter by the results of your measure, calculated measure. You cannot place a calculated measure on a slicer. Picture perfect. Is it okay, right? The next one is calculated column has row context. The calculation, you can do the calculation row by row. So whereas in the case of measures, right, the measures reacts to filter context. So the measures will get impacted based on the filters that you applied using your visuals or using your slicers or something like that. Slicer is also visual, or using your filter pane, right? Based on which your the measure will get changed. The calculation your measure will get changed. The calculated columns are static. It is stored in memory. It is pre-calculated. Whereas the measures are dynamic. It is CPU intensive. It can get the formulas or the DAX queries that used as part of measure will get executed on the fly. Only when you call upon it, it will get executed. And in the case of calculated columns, when the report is refreshing, right? So the calculations will happen. Okay. Whereas in the case of measures, it will get calculated when you include into the report using matrix visual, something like that. Okay. And also calculated columns increase the file size, your model size. In measures, it does not increase your file size. Okay, and the calculated columns are visible as part of our data view, whereas the measures are visible as part of your visual only. If you have more calculated column, it can consume a lot of memory, and if you have too many measures with the more complexity, right, it might take a while to respond due to calculations running when you apply changes through slices or filters. Okay, so there is a there is a the flip side with both the cases, right? So there is a flip side with both the cases, calculated column and measures, but there are some advantages also. You need to be diligent in terms of choosing, when to choose which one. Okay, it is up to you. Okay, you need to decide, but there are certain things you cannot do it as part of calculated column. There are certain things you cannot do it with measures also, but certain things you can do it with both, like I showed you, right? SumX you can do it with this one also, right? So next one is evaluation context. That is one of the important concept. What we will do is next week we will spend 2.5 hours, 2.5 hours. Let me see, I don't want to give any upfront commitment, and later on if I change it will not be good. So next weekend most likely we'll try to cover the majority of the things. Okay, and you'll be up and running. You can probably start float your profile, and you can or you can send your profile, updated profile. Let me also work on it to start float your profile, and followed by the next weekend we will discuss about the advanced concepts like how to use DAX Studio. Those of you not yet installed DAX Studio, please go ahead and install DAX Studio. We'll explain you in detail how to use DAX Studio also in the upcoming weekend, and with DAX Studio how we can do benchmark, how we can identify the bottleneck in our DAX queries, how we can address those bottleneck. Okay, how we can improve the query performance. Okay, all right. So with this I'm going to wrap up today's session. We'll circle back next weekend, and sorry about yesterday's assignment which I gave it to you. Please start work on the assignment which I gave it to you. That doesn't require any DAX, and you have every liberty to go ahead and use the data set to start create measures also. Now you are comfortable with creating measures, calculated column, everything. You can go ahead and do that, right? And you will share some more assignments, and that assignments, right, will share with some KPIs and other things. You can implement it with that formula, and you are all set, right? So in the meanwhile, if you start preparing, you are all set. So now you are good with up to the sum and SumX, all the things whatever I covered as of today, and the advanced part followed by the next week, because it requires a lot of time to cover many things. The query tuning, what is the how to view the physical plan, logical plan, it's a very advanced topic. Okay, and followed by that we'll spend some time for the SQL queries, right? SQL thing, everything. All right, so fine, it is getting late. Sorry guys, don't get me wrong. If you have any questions, please WhatsApp me. Okay, I have office calls also coming up. Don't get me wrong. Okay, and yeah, last question. Yeah, Anuradha, you tell me. You are asking questions. Except Anuradha, rest of them are okay, right? Yeah, tell me, Anuradha. Now I covered this thing, right? So next weekend we'll cover most of the things. Okay, and what you do, right, you can next weekend onwards you are all set. Okay, you can start prepare it. So, and again you need to go extra mile. We give direction. You cannot expect everything from everyone, right? Not all people are with this advanced concept. Obviously you should be able to crack the interview. Yes, Anuradha, go ahead. Can you make it a little bit faster? I'm sick, and also I have a lot of other office calls also. Tell me, can you make it fast? Yeah.
No, you asked, right? You people did assignment. I thought of telling yes, I did.
Oh, okay. Okay. So you did it.
I
Why you did
shared.
not share it? Why don't you share it? Okay. Or else, what you do, right? You can probably, yeah, in that we don't have, yeah, we have lot of data is there, right? Almost 6 or 7
Yes,
tables are there. You can
yes,
create
yes.
some measures. So why don't you do some kind of, I will share some KPI related formulas. You can
Okay.
create measures, calculated column, everything. All right.
Fine, sir. Fine.
All right. Sorry, don't get. I should have spent some more time since I cancelled yesterday.